Now, without further ado, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Mr. Scott Jenkins.
Nicely done. Thank you. Well, hi. Thanks for having me today. I'm going to talk at you for a little bit, but I'd really rather have this be more of a conversation than a lecture. So I welcome your questions. If it's a burning question as we go, we can try it right away if you really have to, but it's probably best if we wait till we're done and we'll pass the mic around so everybody can hear the questions. I'm just getting into Ray Anderson's book about the radical industrialist, and I know that Georgia Tech has a great history of innovation and leadership, and to be here at the Impact Speaker Series is quite a treat. I think you're going to see what I'd like to convey to you is that the intersection of sports and sustainability is really an interesting place to exhibit leadership and create impact. And as we're challenged with environmental issues and climate change issues, we really have got to get at it from a cultural standpoint, which means everybody's got to play the game. And it can't just be the enviros or the engineers who think they're going to solve the problem, because it involves all of us. So I think today you'll see some of the things that we've been doing in sports and hopefully leave you with some optimism over what progress we're about to make and are making. And then also share with you some excitement about the stadium that we're building here in Atlanta. How many people have been to a sporting event in the last year? How many people would say you're a sports fan of some team, of some form or other? That's pretty typical. Most people are. How many people follow science and climate change issues closely or pay attention to that? Quite a bit fewer. Sport is really a big business. It's a $450 billion a year business, and as you know, it crosses all demographics, cultural boundaries, geographical boundaries. So it's a really interesting place to play in this space. And as I mentioned by asking you questions, there's research that indicates that not a lot of people pay attention to science, but most everybody pays attention to sports. And it's also an interesting place because all businesses meet on the playing field. Businesses of all kinds of advertisers as suppliers to our industry. So we commissioned a study through the Green Sports Alliance. We have a summit every year, and we asked sports fans around the country a series of questions just to kind of gauge their interest and see if sustainability and the environment was on their conscience and what they thought about it. And I think it gives us hope, it gives me hope that we're really starting to pay attention a little bit, that it is starting to influence culture, and I think sport has that ability to do that. Obviously this summer there was a huge march in New York, which is some indication of that, but it's not that hard to find 400,000 environmentally minded people to get together around an issue like that, but we're really talking about hundreds of millions of people that really have to be aware of it and start to make choices to help solve the problem. So when we commissioned this study, we asked our fans concerned about the environment. And again, this is in North America fans. We did a survey of about 1,000 sports fans. And surprisingly, 81% of the people said they were concerned about the environment, which surprised me. Can changing personal habits make a difference? Again, a sense of strong optimism. 79% said yes. Are fans worried about how younger fans will be affected? 73% said yes. And one little thing, and I know there's people in here that are really interested in recycling. I happen to be a recycling geek. Even 62% of the people said they notice when people don't recycle. I took that as a good sign that it's starting to get in our conscious. 6 years ago, a handful of people got together in Seattle. It was the professional sports teams up in the Pacific Northwest, from the Canucks to the WNBA Storm, the MLS Sounders, Seahawks, Mariners, and Trailblazers. And we got together to talk about what we were doing environmentally. And of course, in the Northwest, you probably not too hard to imagine people are concerned or interested in the environment. Sports teams might be playing in that space. So we decided to start a nonprofit organization. The first conversation started 6 years ago. We launched 4 years ago. And our aim was really to start being a resource and try to encourage people in the sports industry to start doing things around sustainability. So when we launched in March of 2011, we had 11 teams and venues that were members of the Alliance. And we held a summit a few months later in Portland, where we had a nice turnout, a couple hundred people. We had a bunch of partners come together, the EPA, the Natural Resources Defense Council, Bonneville Environmental Foundation, and it was a bit of a tree hugger love fest around sports. We got together the next year, well, actually 11 is the launch year. By the time we had the summit, we had 39 members. So from March to July, we had found some early adopters. A year later in Seattle, we had the summit, and we had 159 members in the alliance. We went to New York the year after that, we had 201. This past year, we had a summit in Santa Clara. We had 244 teams and venues and leagues that were members of the alliance. And today, we're approaching 300. So we'll have a summit in Chicago this summer. Hopefully, we'll hit 300 by then. We're getting a lot of interest internationally. We're getting a lot of interest in the collegiate world. Initially, the focus was professional sports. And so most of our membership is around professional sports, but it's growing. So there's three main pillars of our work. It's around greening operations, and it's focused on the leagues, the teams, the venues, the events, and colleges. It's about greening the supply chain, involving our vendors, our sponsors, and our partners. And I think the best, most powerful piece of this is really the leveraging of what we're doing within sports to talk to the public in general. And that fan engagement piece is the most exciting part. All the sports fans, the communities that they're in, students, and the athletes. So what are some of the program areas we're working on? Energy efficiency and renewables. We have a mascots program we're about to launch. There's a whole bunch of teams that have mascots that are on the endangered species list, so we feel that there's a good tie-in there. Healthy foods is a topic that seems to be gaining interest. Water quality and conservation, waste management, the waste diversion, recycling programs. Transportation is a big thing. In fact, if you're looking at carbon emissions for a sporting event, the single biggest component of that is really how the fans get to and from the venue. And a lot of people drive cars, and that's really where the bulk of the carbon comes from. Obviously, we use energy, we create waste, the team has to travel, the officials have to travel, but in the scheme of things, it's really about how the fans come and go to the venue, how they come and go to work, how they come and go to school. And it's a nice context to see the relative importance. That's a tough nut to solve, and one that we need to do a good job of. Purchasing, greening our supply chain, where we get our paper products, how we clean the buildings, and then we have a Women in Sports and the Environment initiative as well. So we've had a really busy year. We're kind of going into the phase what I call 2.0. We launched with 1.0. We launched with about $100,000 in our first year with one employee. We now have 8 employees and have a $2 million operating budget. So we've got a lot of things going. We've got a greening advisor that we're updating and rebranding. We've got this mascot report and Species Forever presentation program we're launching. Champions of Game Day Food report that's going to be coming out. Healthy Foods campaign that follows up behind that. We've got a lighting playbook around LED lighting, and you're starting to see professional sports venues finally getting lit with LED lights. We have our annual summit along with our Women's Symposium. We have a green cleaning playbook that's coming out, and we'll be launching workshops around that and our LED lighting workshops. So we hope to be able to offer programs to our members all over the country, North America, and even international. So we've got a pretty aggressive agenda for the next year. So what's the value proposition, of a better way to play? When we started this, convincing leagues or team owners or even people within our organizations that work for us, why should we care? Why should we do this? Why should sports take on sustainability and environmental initiatives? Well, first and foremost, in any business, it's about the bottom line. And we all know that a wise use of resources is going to save money. And we've had significant savings in energy and water and waste costs and the things that we consume. Also in sports, sponsorship and our corporate partners is a big revenue stream. And it's a way to engage our partners and create platforms to talk about that relationship. And sustainability has given that ability to sports. It obviously helps green our brand, which creates some value. All sports venues and teams have a social responsibility to their community, to their fans. So it's a way to fulfill that. We can improve our environmental performance, which gets at the underlying environmental issues. And again, the biggest opportunity we have is really that lever, to leverage what we're doing to get other people to follow suit and support these kinds of behaviors. So some examples of things, and I use Seattle since I was there for 7 years, and I've been in Atlanta for about a year now. This was our energy use. It was using Energy Star Portfolio Manager's energy intensity, tracking it at Safeco Field over a number of years. $2.1 million, that's not bad money to take a 25% haircut in what we're consuming in utilities. And when you apply that across like baseball and you go Major League Baseball, hey, if we can do it in Seattle, why can't you do it in Houston, or why can't you do it in New York? And teams are doing those kinds of things. And if everybody took a 25% reduction in energy use, that's $16 million a year that goes to the bottom line across the league. So as you start to scale this and look at a campus building or a campus or a city, they become huge numbers economically and big impacts from a carbon standpoint. So it's a huge opportunity. Zero waste is another big area, and we've had a lot of success with that. I know you guys have doing some neat things. I heard before the program started with students here at the stadium. And you had a great football season too. Love that. But zero waste initiatives are popping up within sports. And at Safeco Field, we had a little fun with it. Felix Hernandez was our star pitcher, so let's strike out the landfill. And we basically controlled everything we served for our fans, so it was all compostable. And so we no longer sent the food waste and the packaging to the landfill, we sent it to the composter. And obviously we recycled all other materials that we could. And over a series of time, we reached a 90% diversion rate. So we started with a 12% diversion rate. 12% of our waste got recycled. 88% went to the landfill. We pretty much flipped our waste stream on its head, where almost everything gets reused and very little goes to the landfill. And in Seattle, where landfill is costly, again, there's a bottom line savings to us of about $125,000. In addition, we had corporate partnerships that jumped on board that started paying us money to be associated with the zero waste program. So we saved operating dollars, we created advertising revenue, and we did the right thing. So that takes me to what we're doing here in Atlanta and what brought me to Atlanta. It's a really exciting project. Has anybody seen the recent fly-through video online? I'm going to show that in a few minutes for the folks that haven't seen it. But one of the things that attracted me, two really major things that attracted me to Atlanta was Arthur Blank's vision for the stadium. It wasn't just about providing the best sports experience that there is for the NFL and for MLS and for the events we're going to host, like the Final Four, Super Bowl, College National Championships. It was making a difference in the community. And sustainability is one of our major focal points of the design of the stadium. Not only is it designed to be the best sports facility, it's also designed to be the most sustainable. And the other thing I like about Arthur is he's looking at not just the stadium, but the impact on the neighborhood in the west side of Atlanta, and is investing a lot of time and resources to making a difference in the neighborhood and in people's lives through an interesting program, West Side Works. We've put to work like 60 people that were without a job from the neighborhood that are now working in construction jobs. So it's really more than just the sports facility. It's an important part of the community. So what are we doing to make it a better way to play in the stadium? I mentioned LED field lights. There's 2 NFL stadiums. If you watched the Super Bowl, you saw that under LED lights. That's the first Super Bowl to be like that. There's 2 NFL stadiums with it. Seattle just changed out their sports lights. They used to be metal halide everywhere in the industry. LED is much better. They're saving about 60% of the energy. And instead of bulbs burning for 3,000 hours, they burn for 100,000 hours, the LEDs. So way less energy, way less heat, and a lot less maintenance involved. Hopefully, if things go well, we'll have an all-LED stadium. We're working through the numbers now. And in fact, if you try to buy conventional lighting, today you can find it, but it's hard to find it. In the next years to come, you won't find it. It'll all be LED. The whole marketplace is shifting that way. And we're just coming on a little bit early, hoping we can get all LED and get it affordably. Natural ventilation is another interesting design component to the building. The Georgia Dome's inside all the time. We wanted to have more of an outdoor feel for the stadium, so we have a retractable roof. So we're going to treat the stadium more like an outdoor stadium that can close when we want to, as opposed to a closed stadium that can open. Most of the football venues right now primarily play closed. We're going to play open because we want the outdoor feel, but we also know it uses less energy. It's less resource intensive to play outside, and we think it's a better experience to play soccer or football in an outdoor environment, and it happens to fit with our sustainability goals. We're also going to be really aggressive with the water credits for LEED. We're going to get every possible LEED point for the water category, and we'll be collecting all our rainwater. We'll be reusing it in our cooling towers, and we'll use it for irrigating our landscaping. And it's important not just for the stadium, but again, getting at the broader community. It's important for the Proctor watershed area because the area, the west side of Atlanta, tends to flood. And when there's lots of buildings and fast runoff, it means bad things downstream. And so we're going to capture and reuse that water. So again, it's partly a community effort. It's a sustainability effort as well. And then we're going to aim to be a zero waste facility, and we'll have on-site renewable energy. So you'll see solar power panels on top of the garage, on top of the parking lots as you enter the building, on top of the security gate areas. And we'll also have a fair amount of electric vehicle charging stations. And we're working closely with Georgia Power, who's helping us achieve those things. So with that, let me run into our fly-through video. It's a little bit on the salesy side, imagery-wise, to show you the kind of spaces we have, the clubs and different angles of the stadium. So it's a little over 3 minutes, but it'll give you a good idea of what the stadium looks like. And I think that you'll see that we have really an iconic building. I mean, there's a real buzz around the country about this building. It's not just a typical football stadium. There's something special about it architecturally, and sustainability is an important piece of that. All right, so that's me talking at you about what's happening in sports, what's happening with our stadium, and I would love to open it up to questions to get your thoughts on sports and the impact it can have, and how do we engage folks like you to help make a difference, to influence culture, and what you think of the new stadium. So with that, I think they're going to go up and down the aisle with mics.
Well, just a quick question. What's going to happen to the old one?
The dome is going to come down. Yep. Right now, if you've seen the new construction, We've got about 500 people a day working on site. We're pouring about 400 yards of concrete a day, and we're trying to get the concrete structure up. We'll start bolting down steel beginning in May. So you're going to see the structure take shape real quickly. You'll also notice that at the nearest point, it's 84 feet away from the dome. So it's really tight site. Once the new stadium's open, there'll be some Supercross events at the dome that will end the tenure of the dome, and then it'll be torn down. As much of the materials that can be reused or recycled will be reused. And then they'll make a green parking space there, and they're also talking about developing a hotel and a parking garage to support the events down there between the stadium and the Georgia World Congress.
So part of it's going to a landfill, right?
We're going to try to avoid the landfill, yes, with as much of it as we can.
Yeah. Just a question about how you're interacting with owners, corporate partners, in which is there an education piece as it relates to sustainability, or is it just a given in terms of like, yeah, totally, let's save money, let's do this, or do you have to say, no, wait, this is why we're doing this so that it can save you money. By the way, it's also good for the planet.
Right. I think there's a spectrum. There's some people that I would say are very enlightened and get it, and the owner of the Pittsburgh Pirates, Bob Nutting, gets it, understands it. He's fully behind it. There are some teams that haven't joined the alliance yet, and there we're like, okay, we've got to raise awareness to these people that there's an opportunity there. We usually start with the business case, and whether people, if you're a climate denier, you should still want to do what we're doing because we're improving the bottom line. So we really push the business aspects of it. But once people see and we're sharing that story across the industry, most people get it now. It's hard to ignore. Our goal is to have almost all the professional sports teams in the big leagues be members of the Green Sports Alliance, but I can tell you the majority are already members and are already doing some really good work, and the league offices are embracing it. We happen to have a Green Sports Alliance workshop in Vancouver last week, and Gary Bettman happened to come to town to visit the Canucks. He's the commissioner of the NHL, and Gary came by and visited us and spent 15, 20 minutes, and he gets it, he knows the issues, and he's not afraid to talk about it. And that's coming right from the top of the pile from the league. So when the commissioner's saying, yeah, we should be doing this, this makes environmental sense, we need to do it, makes good business sense, we need to do it. And you'll get that from the NBA, you'll get that from the MLB. So we've got really strong support, but we have to continue to educate people about why and get more people behind the movement. Over here.
I was wondering about your long-term goals for the Sports Alliance. Maybe, like, how do you convince the fans? Like, I know tailgating isn't one of the most environmentally friendly activities, and it's great to have things inside the stadium that are environmentally friendly. But as a fan, I may not take those home with me. Are there any goals to maybe try to influence? I know you mentioned it at the start, but
yeah, absolutely. I mean, fan engagement is really to us the holy grail of trying to make a difference culturally, because that's where the multiplier effect comes in. And I think when you see your team and your venue diverting a bunch of their waste and recycling things and messages during the game about them doing that, it makes a mark. It resonates a little bit. Now, is it enough to make people to change behaviors? Maybe, maybe not. We have some research that BASF, the big German chemical company, was a sponsor of our Zero Waste Initiative in Seattle with the Mariners. And they sponsored our Zero Waste Initiative. And we promoted a thing called Sustainable Saturdays. So we would do a quiz in game and then invite people to text to win. And then if somebody had the right answer, we'd randomly draw one and go award a prize and then give the answer to everybody, the payoff late in the game. BASF, being the engineers that they are and good business people that they are, went out and surveyed our fans in general randomly and said, are you aware of this Sustainable Saturday program and our Zero Waste Initiative at Safeco Field? And further, have you changed the way you handle organics at home, how you divert organics waste at home? And almost 50% of the people surveyed said, yes, we're doing more of that at home. So that was directly tied to this initiative we had. And we do need to take it outside of the stadiums into the tailgating areas. And we have partners like Novelis, which is a company here in Atlanta that's the world's largest aluminum recycler. And they help us promote recycling in the parking lots. So we do need to expand that out. especially for football since it's such a big part of the game day experience. Yes?
So I'm just curious to know more about the women's sports and environment and how that fits into your Green Sports Alliance.
Yeah, that's a good question. Half of our board are women, and so I think the board and the people who created the movement understand the power of being inclusive. I don't think the sports industry is as inclusive as it needs to be, should be, and so there's a lot of opportunity, I think, there to build a movement, and we're looking to build a movement, empower people, and that's just an area of need we have, I think, and an opportunity, and I also think you could apply that to diversity as well. If you look around the campus, or you look around your community, or look around the athletes, we as an organization, we as a business should reflect that, and so I think it's been underrepresented, and we need to do more. Yeah.
What is the cost for pursuing LEED, the estimated cost for pursuing LEED Platinum on this building in terms of administrative and cost of work, and what's the projected payback?
What's the cost of doing the lead?
Yeah,
For the project?
estimated cost for pursuing LEED.
I wish I had a number for you. I don't right now. I can tell you that we are very budget conscious, and good design costs money, but good design also, you can find better ways to do things and save money other places. So, for instance, the natural ventilation, we can cut the amount of time we run things. So we don't need as much equipment, we aren't going to maintain as much, and we aren't going to use as much utilities. So some of it is the front cost, and I wouldn't stand up here and tell you today that it's going to cost less to build a LEED building. It is going to cost a little more. It is going to take the designers more work to figure out the puzzle, but what you get on the back end is way better. And so the business case is really looking at the lifetime cycle of that. I'll use LED lights as an example. If we were to buy all traditional lighting, incandescents and metal halides and whatever everybody else has done in the past, we could put all the lights in our building and save $2.8 million. Or another way to say that is we can put the next generation LED lights in and pay a $2.8 million premium, and I can tell you that it's a 7-year payback. So if you're building a building for the next 30 plus years, 7-year payback's not a bad deal. And in a lot of fixtures, it's a 2, 3, 4-year payback. So it's that kind of stuff where it makes sense to do it and makes sense to invest in it, the time and effort from the design standpoint, a little bit up front, but you reap huge rewards on the back end of that.
You touched a little bit on construction and demolition waste, about what you plan to do with the existing dome. But for the stuff that's already been going on, for instance, when the church got torn down, where did that waste go to? And then are there any plans for converting any of the existing lots on the other side of Ivan Allen into permeable lots?
I can answer some of that. Where we can reuse, we're trying to reuse. Is it Life Cycle Building something Center? They do great work, and I know they've come through the dome and they went through the churches, and we're trying to repurpose things. So we're doing what we can during the construction to avoid sending things to the landfill. Let's see, permeable lots. A lot of the lots across the street from the north side, we don't control, we don't own. So that's a little bit hard to say how that's going to play out. I can tell you where the dome is, and when it comes down, that's going to be a green parking lot. So it's a paver kind of system that grass grows through that can retain water. So we are being very conscious about that to try to reduce the storm impacts.
Got a question back here.
Do you have a partnership with Marta or something else to improve public transportation on the day of game or concert or something to avoid like everyone driving to the stadium?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And as I mentioned earlier, transportation is the #1 carbon impact for any sporting event. In fact, I would venture to say for you guys to come to class today and for the teachers and professors and administration to come today and go home, the lights take energy and what you might consume takes energy and emits carbon. It's how you got here and how you get home that really has the big impact. So that really is an important issue. We're lucky that we're in a downtown location, so we chose to stay downtown Atlanta where there's existing public infrastructure. We were between 2 MARTA stops. So we are looking at how do we maximize the use of that public transit, and we have a pretty big percentage of fans that choose to use it now. We also have an opportunity with Major League Soccer to get a whole new set of fans accustomed to coming in on public transit. and freeing up that traffic and reducing the carbon impact. So we're going to look for ways to maximize that for sure. Carpooling, bicycling, walking to the game. It'd be nice if people lived downtown. It'd be a lot easier where you didn't have to drive. Maybe someday that'll be more of a reality, but right now we're very car-centric, unfortunately, and you know, with that comes carbon, with that comes traffic, and we've got to figure out how to minimize that to make the game day experience as good as we can.
You have another question on that side.
So going back to Green Sports Alliance, how many Atlanta area corporations, organizations are partnered in Green Sports Alliance, and what are your plans to try to maybe increase those memberships?
Yeah, so what opportunity do we have here in Atlanta? You know, that's a good question. There's a company called NatureWorks that isn't based in Atlanta, but the guy that I work with that handles their international operations is here in Marietta, and they're a supporter of ours. We'd love to have, you know, Georgia Power, Georgia Pacific, Novelis be partners of ours. And we need to build that network. So there is a lot of opportunity. You know, again, we're pretty new to that. We just started a corporate membership, which we never had before. So the only way for corporations to really engage with us was around sponsorship at the summit. And we know that that's a good way to grow that influence and to help fund, so we have more capacity to do the work that we can do. So that's an area we need to grow. But to that point, we're planning on bringing the Green Sports Alliance Summit here to Atlanta the summer of 2017. So we'll be in Chicago this year, end of June. We'll be in New York next year. And then with the new stadium open and all the opportunities we have here, we want to bring it to Atlanta. So hopefully you guys can participate in that. We can build some of those alliances.
Since this is one of the first stadiums of this kind, at what point with like technological improvements is this stadium going to become obsolete, or these advanced new things that we're doing with this stadium, at what point are they going to be commonplace or even outdated?
That's a good question. You know, about the time you build something and design something, somebody outdoes you. The newest NFL stadium is the 49er Stadium, Levi's Stadium, and it's really slick, and it's LEED Gold, and it's the first LEED Gold, I think, professional sports venue in the NFL. We're working really hard to be the first platinum professional sports venue in North America, and I think we're going to achieve that. So when we design what we're designing today, we're trying to future-proof it as much as we can, and from a technology standpoint, connectivity standpoint, we're going to have a lot of infrastructure. What somebody does after us, you know, they obviously have the advantage of knowing what they're shooting for. But I think we're putting it out there pretty far to a point that nobody's gone before. And if someone else beats us or equals us, I think that point of leadership is valuable, and I would welcome somebody to do just that. I'm going to come back to your question. Who asked the question about sponsorship, corporate in Atlanta? Was it you? I just thought UPS was a corporate partner of ours, and there was one other, UL, United Laboratory. So we've had good support here in Atlanta, and I'll tell you too, coming from Seattle, I didn't know what to expect in the South. You know, if in Atlanta or Portland or Vancouver, you kind of expect a certain green element. I'm blown away by what I see here in Atlanta with companies that are forward thinking and the amount of energy and passion around sustainability that's coming from the business community. So I really think Atlanta's positioned to really take a leadership role. And if you can do it in the South, you can do it anywhere, right?
How has your experience kind of planning on the front end for sustainability been here in Atlanta compared to in Seattle, where you're kind of making improvements as they go?
You know, that's a really good question, and I guess I'd answer it by saying first, I've been here a year now, and it's very uncommon for a team to hire the general manager for a stadium that doesn't exist 3 years ahead of time. While we have architects and engineers that are working towards certain things, and they have some direction from ownership, Arthur specifically wanted me to be here to make sure we got it right, and we took as much effort as we can up front to make those decisions and to guide us. And so I think we've been blessed by having that kind of commitment from the Falcons and from Arthur, and I feel really fortunate to be here, and that's part of the reason I came to Atlanta, to be here early on the ground floor and have that kind of influence. If you're in an existing building, there's lots of opportunities. I mean, there's a lot of waste out there in the system. You know, we got a lot of engineers out there, I'm sure, maybe some industrial engineers. I mean, when you think about lighting and LEDs, I mean, technology provides answers. If you think about waste diversion strategies, I mean, most people just throw stuff away and thinks it's going to magically disappear. So when you put a conscious effort into it, you make a huge difference. You can do that on energy, you can do that on water, you can do that on waste diversion, you can do that on how you clean the building, what you buy. I mean, do you buy recycled paper, fiber, or do you buy virgin fiber? Do you even know, or do you ask? So some of that, back to your question, we got to make sure people know the right questions to ask and why. And so there's an education component to that, but there's opportunity in existing buildings. And I think by what you see at Levi Stadium, and that was something they touted very much, that it was LEED Gold, and you're going to see us touting very much that we're LEED, hopefully Platinum. And hopefully that brings everybody up to thinking at a higher level.
Is there much that the Atlanta Falcons or the Green Sports Alliance are doing as far as sustainability during construction, like materials being used or practices on the construction site itself?
Absolutely. You know, and that's part of LEED. You know, when I say LEED, there's various forms of LEED. LEED new construction is what we're at. So there's a materials component to that, and how we handle waste and what kind of materials we use are an important part of the LEED certification. The newer version of LEED is pushing the envelope a little bit more about what chemicals are made up into those and what happens to them, kind of more what the impact is. And so, you know, like UL is a real leader in understanding what those materials are and certifying them. So we're going to play a little bit of role in kind of defining what the future looks like for LEED in the material side of things. So it is most definitely a focal point of the project. Yeah.
Hi, have you considered alternate forms of electricity generation, like using solar energy or perhaps using the waste on a game day for in generation of electricity through biomass or biogas?
Yeah, we are going to have a fair amount of on-site PV, so we'll have solar power. That'll be the bulk of it. The other energy initiatives are around natural ventilation and just really efficient things, you know, waterless urinals, low flow toilets. I'm getting beyond water, but conservation efforts. It gets a little harder from a dollar standpoint to make that pencil out. On the organic side, the waste stream, can we do, you know, anaerobic digestion and burn gas to generate power? That's an interesting idea, and there's people looking at that. I wouldn't rule it out, but it's a little hard to figure that piece of the puzzle out. And to some degree, we're kind of a traditional building with a lot of sustainability things in mind, but you can push the envelope way beyond that, and that gets really, I think, way beyond LEED in a lot of cases, although there's innovation points you can get for LEED, but when you get into like the living building concept, then you really start to push the envelope on that, and we definitely could do more, and I'd love to figure out ways to incorporate it in the project and then talk about it, because those solutions are out there and evolving.
Hi, so I have a little bit of a different question, but in your professional careers, you've moved around a lot, obviously, into a lot of different roles and including just a lot of different regional areas in the U.S. As a young professional, you know, I'm also considering, you know, maybe weighing the benefits of, you know, change and moving and really adapting to new careers. Can you maybe talk about any advice that you have, or maybe how moving so much for you has impacted your career and your professional life?
Sure. Hopefully you can do a better job than I have holding a job. People ask me a lot, how do you get into the business, and you know, what roles and opportunities are there? First of all, in sports, there's a lot of competition. A lot of people want to work in sports. Having said that, I love people with a business background, people with an engineering background, because I want people that are critical thinkers, that are innovators, who can figure out how to solve things, and that aren't just there to watch the game. But I think moving around really helps. And I wouldn't be where I am, and I wouldn't know half of what I know if I'd not moved on. I first started managing office buildings for a real estate developer. I then went to work for the state of Wisconsin, managing state-owned office buildings. And then an opportunity came up to work at the University of Wisconsin, running their athletic facilities and events. I thought, wow, that sounds like fun. So I did that for a few years. We built a basketball hockey arena while I was there. And having a background in construction administration, it made a lot of sense, and I could contribute to the project. And while I was there, the Brewers called me and said, hey, well, you want to work on this project called Miller Park? And you know, I went from a $80 million project to a $600 million project. And I didn't want to leave Madison. I went to school there. I worked there for many years. All my friends, my family were there. But I thought, wow, how do I pass that up? And so I left and went to Milwaukee, which isn't a big drive and a big change, but you know, change nonetheless. And I was there for 5 years. Through a couple years at County Stadium, built Miller Park, opened Miller Park, and then had an opportunity to go to Philadelphia and open up a football stadium, which sounded like a lot of fun. So I did that. only was there for 3 years, but had an opportunity to go back in baseball. The Mariners wanted me to go to work for them, so I went to Safeco Field. So it was a change. It was similar jobs, but different places, and everywhere you go, you learn stuff. And then having been there for 7 years and kind of done a lot of everything that I could do, and with a family, it's tough to pick up the family and the kids and move. But when I heard about this project, I was like, wow, how do you pass that up? You know, it's NFL, it's MLS, it's a cool roof, it's that video board, it's the chance to get a LEED Platinum building, and for an owner that's really committed to the community. So it was a tough decision to move, but I think if you're going to find opportunity, you got to go where it is, and sometimes changing is the best thing you can do to get the experience. I think if you're in a particular job in a particular company, it's sort of easy, and it's sad to say, it's easy for them to kind of take you for granted and see you in the role that you're just doing. But I know so many times that people left that role to go to another company and get some more experience, got hired back at a higher level because that person was really good. And I think they realized their value. Plus, you grow as a person and as a profession when you get more perspectives. And alongside of that, continuing education is really key. It took me a long time to go back to grad school. I think I was one of the older guys in the class, you know, and I thought I was going to do that after being out for a couple years. It ended up being 20-some years before I went back, and I'll tell you, that was an invaluable experience that makes me better today. So continuing your education and not being a job hopper. You know, if I see someone's resume and they're there for a year or two, and they're there for a year or two, yeah, you know, that's not what employers are looking for. And I think it's hard to master your job in a year or two. But if you have the opportunity to climb and get a better opportunity, by all means, take it. I think it's good. If you can get opportunity where you are, that's probably the best option of all. But that doesn't always happen. So I think being willing to move is a smart thing and broaden your experience base.
So Scott, the numbers from a smart design for a large structure like the stadium are impressive. Do you see it having traction anywhere else in the Atlanta community, having such a flagship building, being so sustainable? Do you see your personal impact on the community reaching beyond this? You know, there are other large structures, obviously, in any city, or smaller structures that could benefit from a sustainable and smart design. Do you feel any traction of having, you know, the stadium being so sustainable yet? Do you get any questions from other, you know, organizations around Atlanta, or, you know, that have big buildings and could benefit from this
Sure.
type of thinking?
I think it's early to say, you know, what impact we'll have, but I'm very optimistic that we'll have a significant impact. When you think of Atlanta, what building comes to mind? You know, you think of St. Louis, what building comes to mind? You think of New York, what building comes to mind? You think of Washington, D.C. I think our building has a chance to be kind of an identity for Atlanta. And I think it being downtown and representing what it does with the Final Four, Super Bowl, the NFL, MLS, the Chick-fil-A Bowl, the Kickoff Classic, the State High School Championships, it's going to be a cool place. It's going to be where things are happening. It's going to be where the community comes together. And it's iconic architecture. So I think because we really embrace sustainability and make it a good business case, and people see it, you know, in practice, I think that exhibiting that leadership and showing the value, I'm very optimistic it will influence other people. And being from Seattle the last 7 years, what we did at the ballpark and what the Seahawks did at CenturyLink Field, I know that impacted the community positively. It impacted public policy, it impacted fan behavior, it impacted other businesses. And so again, that's really that lever of influencing culture. And business is a key piece of that, but just the fans are a big piece of that too. And I think we have a great opportunity to make things happen here in Atlanta, and beyond Atlanta for that matter, whether it's the NFL or the South or the state of Georgia. I think it's going to have a big impact.
Really trying to get my head around the whole systems aspect of sports. And while I'm glad that there's a Green Sports Alliance and we're going to have a sustainable stadium rather than a non-sustainable stadium, I just wonder whether the board and the group of the Sports Alliance looks at the bigger social issues that are the other side of the environmental coin. And particularly, I'm thinking of the bigger why of why you have players who get into trouble as role models. Does it matter if they play in a sustainable stadium or not? What does it do to the communities where you replaced historical black churches with stadiums? So does the Sports Alliance get bigger, and how can you get my head around the bigger systems approach to such a mega project?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, and that's a really broad social question, I think. And I think sustainability is just one way to exhibit leadership within the industry that has a really positive impact. Sports and athletes are a sliver of society, and what you find in society, you're going to find in the athletes. The difference is what happens to the athletes gets to the front page of the news, on the newspaper and on the TV. And so it's that visibility that's a two-edged sword. It can be used to say, wow, that's great leadership, isn't that wonderful, to inspire people? And also it can be, wow, look at that, can you believe that's happening? And how can that be a part of sport? But the reality is we're a cross-section of society, and it's there. And I think the good thing is when something bad happens, there is a focus and there is activity that takes place that moves the needle. And without that visibility, without people caring, that issue may stay dormant, if you will, in terms of the eyes of the public, but it's still a problem. So my hope is we use sports as a positive vehicle. And I think sustainability is one of those places that we can reach a lot of people, that if you were an environmentalist and you work for a nonprofit, or I'll call them tree huggers, and I'm a tree hugger myself. When we're talking about these issues, we're always talking to ourselves, our same group. But when sports talks about it, all of a sudden that audience gets really broad. And so you can debate the merits of public funding for sports facilities. But I think when you look at the impact socially and you look at the impact economically, and you look at sports as an opportunity to use positive leadership, I think the positive far outweighs the negative.
We have a question on the other side.
I'm trying to understand, not wholly unlike Terry's question, but sort of the bigger aspect of the life cycle of stadiums. And he asked about sort of the obsolescence. And I don't suspect it's because the Georgia Dome doesn't have LED lighting is why it's become obsolete for some reason, or the Braves, that they don't recycle all their waste, that suddenly they have to up and move to Marietta. What is it that's driving in that particular business the need for a new $1 billion and more, increasingly ever more, sort of investment every 25 years, particularly in this town?
Right.
That the Braves, the Falcons are one of the youngest NFL teams around, and yet here we are on our third major stadium in that time period.
Right.
What is it that's really driving the economics or whatever it is that makes stadium obsolete?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I challenge myself with that too. I mean, you could certainly play, we could still be playing football and baseball in Fulton County Stadium, right, if we wanted to, but would we be? Right, right. Yeah, in Lambeau Field, for instance, they've been playing there for a long, long time in Green Bay. Now they have updated the building, right? And I think you have to think about, it's a fair question. I do think you have to think that we're in the entertainment business and we have to stay relevant. So if we were a hotel or a restaurant and we didn't significantly change or retool, and we were 25 years old, it gets to a point where it gets pretty hard to fix it and be relevant, especially in today's world with technology where it is. I also think there's a general upgrade of everybody else and people's expectations in entertainment, and we've got to compete. So there's a little bit of that, and then there's an opportunity to be a leader. And I think this building gives us that platform. It's also about economics, changing the economic model to generate revenue, and that revenue is good for the team. It's also a stadium designed for soccer and MLS, and if we didn't do that, we wouldn't have an MLS team coming to Atlanta. And already we have commitments to some 17,000 season tickets, and we're 2 years away, and we have one employee, the president. So I think there's an opportunity to do things at a better level on a bigger stage. You raise legitimate questions about the functionality of the older venues. Yeah, they function, but I think we're taking it to a whole nother level and competing on the stage that we have to compete at today, and exhibiting the leadership that I think takes a city like Atlanta to the next level. We're also creating economic opportunity and jobs. I mean, if you want to, I would encourage you to look up the Georgia World Congress report on their economic impact of last year. and you see what that does to the community and what the jobs that fuels and the companies. I mean, there's a reason Mercedes-Benz is moving to the Atlanta area. There's a reason UL has an office here. There's a reason Coca-Cola is here. And it takes public infrastructure to make the fabric of a city, whether it's an airport, whether it's Marta, whether it's entertainment and it's a stadium, whether it's all the attractions around Centennial Park. I mean, Atlanta's becoming a destination, and it's driving economic opportunities and it's jobs for people. And what I like about Arthur is it's not just the stadium, it's about the neighborhood. It's about what happens to the churches in the neighborhood. It's about the jobs that are created for the people in the west side of Atlanta. And so I think all boats will rise.
I know you were saying you all are really car-oriented, you know, you have the purpose parking lots and you have the sun things and all of that. But I guess if you all have been, or you might have, I'm not sure, more focused towards people walking towards the stadium, like I know that's probably not really a plausible thing right now with the way it is. If you had, would it have changed more of how, like, what the design of the stadium was in terms of, like, would you need, you know, anchor tenants across the street, you know, people go into, or, like, what would have been the different variables?
That's a really good question. You know, I would love to have a city where people walk places and get out of their cars. You know, and I think you're seeing more of that in Atlanta, especially with the Beltline development where people are on bikes and walking. It's connecting neighborhoods. It's bringing people out of their houses and bringing them out. And it's creating business activities for restaurants and shops in neighborhoods and a sense of community. You know, if you look around downtown Atlanta, and it's a shame when you look to the west side, that was a vibrant, vibrant community a long time ago, and it's not anymore. And you look around downtown, and there's an absence of housing. So you're not going to walk to Buckhead or Marietta, but if you lived in the neighborhood surrounding downtown, you probably would walk. And there's a lot of complicated issues around security, you know, housing, schools, shopping, and what we're focused on the west side is really kind of rebuilding that community so it's livable, and not pushing everybody out, but making it livable, making it attractive. So I think you're going to see more of that, and I think then you will see more people walking to the stadium. And I'm optimistic with the Major League Soccer crowd that you'll see people biking and taking the Beltline to the game. I mean, I would love to see parades of people biking to the ballpark and walking. But the reality is there's just not that concentration right now in that area. I'd love to see us get to that. And once you do, now you're walkable. But right now, we're really, our infrastructure has been built on the car for, you know, many, many years, and you can't just reverse that, unfortunately.
Scott, thanks for coming to Georgia Tech today.
Yeah,
Thank you
my
very
pleasure.
much.
Thank you.